tea. Yeah, this one is peppermint, and this one is a rooibos blend. It's a new one. We got it yesterday. Yeah, I thought you might not be sure about it, so I did bring up the package with me. It's a seasonal tea. It's called Grape Ape, which does not sound very seasonal to me, but who am I to fathom the minds of tea makers? The ingredients are rooibos tea, currants, apple pieces, rosebuds, peppermint, freeze-dried raspberry pieces, and natural flavor, whatever that means. Yeah, so I guess it does have a little bit of peppermint in it too. It sounds delicious to me. What do you think? You'd like the rooibos? Okay, wonderful. Yeah, here you go. I'll just set it down for you there. And peppermint for me, which you know is my favorite, so thank you. Yeah, for steepers, I gave myself Moom and Papa, and I think you have Moom and Mama. Yeah, I am a fan of his top hat, so it would all worked out well. Have you decided what you want to read yet? No. Well, that's alright. We do have a couple options, but first, blanket. Gotta make sure we're cozy, you know? This one is, I think, crochet. I'm not sure if my grandmother or great-grandmother did it, but I think it was one of them. Probably my great-grandmother, because my grandmother wasn't super big fan of crochet, even though she loved to knit. Yeah. It's got that old knit texture, and I love the texture of the flowers and the way they pop out. Yeah. This one good for you? Yeah, here you go. Alright. Now for book choices, we have all of these. Any thoughts about this one? It's Celtic Tales. Fairy tales and stories of enchantment from Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, and Wales. I like the illustrations on this one. It's a fun minimalist color scheme. I am a fan of really beautiful colored illustrations, but sometimes I like a more restrained take, and it does crucially have a bookmark ribbon attached, which you know I love. Maybe for later? Okay, yeah. Let's see, our next book is this book of Victorian fairy tales. It's a pantheon of fairy tale and folklore. The Victorian fairy tale book, edited by Michael Patrick Hearn. Looks like a lot of these are new to me. Has some black and white illustrations. I swear I saw a color one in here somewhere, but maybe not. Maybe not, yeah. Victorian fairy tales, they're classics, but we've heard a lot of them. Next we have this book of Japanese tales. Yeah. I actually haven't read this one, but it's also from the Pantheon Fairy Tale and Folklore Library. It's the same people. I do love the illustration here of a lobster. That's gorgeous. And And it has some historical and cultural context at the beginning, which is fun. Not quite what you're looking for. Okay, we'll put that aside. Second to last, we have this copy of Nordic fairy tales that I actually got secondhand from a bookshop. Inside it has an inscription to someone who's not me, which is fun. The titular fairy tale, the eponymous fairy tale, is East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which you might also know as the Brown Bear of Norway. Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. I love An Impossible Task, A Glass Mountain, and some weird wedding shenanigans. Maybe? Okay, yeah. Oh, look at that. It's a beautiful illustration on the back. Oh, and there it still has the sticker from when I bought it. $5, very good price. Okay. Our last option, and this one you know, is my copy of The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. Very well loved. I think I've only read it all the way through, straight through once. But I've definitely read everything in here at least twice. Perhaps a little violent for tonight. That's totally fair. These get weird. So, which one do you want to pick? East of the Sun, West of the Moon. Yeah. This one is my jam. Gotta have a little sip of tea first. Old Tales from the North. And here's the inscription. March 30th, 1987. Much love, thoughts, hugs, wonderful wishes, and kisses, Aunt Sharon. Well, if it took from 1987 until 2024 for this book to be resold, I'd say she pretty much nailed it with the present. Good job, Aunt Sharon. Now, we have a couple of options for fairy tales. I know, I'm sorry, so many options. We have, of course, East of the Sun and West of the Moon, Prince Lindworm, The Princess on the Glass Hill. Ooh, I didn't know the Three Billy Goats Gruff was Nordic, but I guess that makes sense. And One's Own Children Are Always Prettiest. A little weird. You want to go for East of the Sun, West of the Moon? Yeah, it's a classic. You can't beat a classic. Now, I'm going to take the dust jacket off so it doesn't fall off while I'm reading, but rest assured it will go back on. Alright. One more sip of tea. Good stuff. East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Once on a time, there was a poor husbandman who had so many children that he hadn't much of either food or clothing to give them. Pretty children they all were, but the prettiest was the youngest daughter, who was so lovely that there was no end to her loveliness. So one day, 'twas on a Thursday evening late at the fall of the year, the weather was so wild and rough outside, and it was so cruelly dark, and rain fell and wind blew, till the walls of the cottage shook again. There they all sat round the fire, busy with this thing and that. But just then, all at once, something gave 3 taps on the window pane. Then the father went out to see what was the matter, and when he got out of doors, what should he see but a great big white bear. "Good evening to you," said the white bear. "The same to you," said the man. "Will you give me your youngest daughter, "If you will, I'll make you as rich as you are now poor," said the bear. Well, the man thought he would not at all be sorry to be so rich, but still he thought he must have a bit of a talk with his daughter first. So he went in and told them how there was a great white bear waiting outside, who had given his word to make them so rich if he could only have the youngest daughter. The lassie said no outright. Nothing could get her to say anything else, so the man went out and settled it with the white bear that he should come again the next Thursday evening and get an answer. Meantime, he talked his daughter over and kept telling her of all the riches they would get, and how well off she would be herself. And so at last she thought better of it, and washed and mended her rags, made herself as smart as she could, and was ready to start. I can't say her packing gave her much trouble. Next Thursday evening came the white bear to fetch her, and she got upon his back with her bundle, and off they went. So when they had gone a bit of the way, the white bear said, "Are you afraid?" No, she wasn't. "Well, mind and hold tight by my shaggy coat, and then there's nothing to fear," said the bear. And here we have an illustration of her atop the bear. That is gorgeous. So she rode a long, long way till they came to a great steep hill. There on the face of it the white bear gave a knock, and the door opened, and they came into a castle where there were many rooms all lit up. Rooms gleaming with silver and gold, and there too was a table all ready laid, and it was all as grand could be. Then the white bear gave her a silver bell, and when she wanted anything she was only to ring it, and she would get it at once. Well, after she had eaten and drunk, and evening wore on, she got sleepy after her journey, and thought she would like to go to bed. So she rang the bell, and she had scarce taken hold of it before she came into a chamber where there was a bed ready made, as fair and white as anyone would wish to sleep in, with silken pillows and curtains and gold fringe. All that was in the room was gold or silver, and when she had gone to bed and put out the light, a man came and laid himself along beside her. That was the white bear, who threw off his bee shape at night, but she never saw him, for he always came after she had put out the light, and before the day dawned he was up and off again. So things went on happily for a while, but at last she began to get silent and sorrowful, for there she went about all day alone, and she longed to go home to see her father and mother and brothers and sisters. So one day when the white bear asked her what it was that she lacked, she said it was so dull and lonely there, and how she longed to go home and see her mother and father and brothers and sisters, and that was why she was so sad and sorrowful, because she couldn't get to them. "Well, well," said the bear, "perhaps there's a cure for all this, but you must promise me one thing, not to talk alone with your mother, but only when the rest are by to hear, for she'll take you by the hand and try to lead you into a room alone to talk, but you must mind and not do that, else you'll bring bad luck on the both of us." So one Sunday the white bear came and said now they could set off to see her mother and father. Well, off they started, she sitting on his back, and they went far and long. At last they came to a grand house, and there her brothers and sisters were running about out of doors at play, and everything was so pretty 'twas a joy to see. "This is where your father and mother live now," said the white bear, "but don't forget what I told you, else you'll make us both unlucky." No, bless her, she'd not forget, and when she had reached the house the white bear turned right about and left her. Then when she went in to see her father and mother there was such joy there was no end to it. None of them thought they could thank her enough for all she had done to them. Now they had everything they wished, as good could be, and they all wanted to know how she got on where she lived. Well, she said, it was very good to live where she did, and she had all she wished. What she said beside, I don't know, but I don't think any of them had the right end of the stick, or that they got much out of her. But so, in the afternoon, after they had done dinner, all happened as the white bear said. Her mother wanted to talk with her alone in her bedroom, but she minded what the white bear had said and wouldn't go upstairs. "Oh, what we have to talk about will keep," she said, and put her mother off. But somehow or another her mother got round her at last, and she had to tell her the whole story. So she said how every night when she had gone to bed a man came and lay down beside her as soon as she had put out the light, and how she never saw him because he was always up and away before the morning dawned, and how she went about woeful and sorrowing, for she thought she would so like to see him, and how all day long she walked about there alone, and how dull and dreary and lonesome it was. "My," said her mother, It may well be a troll you slept with, but now I'll teach you a lesson how to set eyes on him. I'll give you a bit of candle, which you can carry home in your bosom. Just light that while he's asleep, but take care not to drop the tallow on him. Yes, she took the candle and hid it in her bosom, and as night drew on, the white bear came and fetched her away. But when they had gone a bit of the way, the white bear asked if all hadn't happened as he had said. Well, she couldn't say that it hadn't. Now, mind, said he, if you have listened to your mother's advice, you have brought bad luck on us both, and then all that has passed between us will be as nothing. No, she said, she hadn't listened to her mother's advice. So when she reached home and had gone to bed, it was the old story all over again. There came a man and lay down beside her, but at the dead of night, when she heard he slept, she got up and struck a light, lit the candle, and let the light shine on him. And so she saw that he was the loveliest prince one had ever set eyes on, and she fell so deep in love with him on the spot that she thought she couldn't live if she didn't give him a kiss there and then. And so she did, but as she kissed him, she dropped 3 hot drops of tallow on his shirt, and he woke up. What have you done? He cried. Now you've made us both unlucky, for you had held out only this 1 year I had been freed. For I have a stepmother who has bewitched me, so that I am a white bear by day and a man by night. But now all ties are snapped between us. Now I must set off from you to her. She lives in a castle which stands east of the sun and west of the moon, and there too is a princess with a nose 3 ells long, and she's the wife I must have now. She wept and took it ill, but there was no help for it. Go he must. Then she asked if she mightn't go with him. No, she mightn't. Tell me the way then, she said, and I'll search you out. That I may surely get leave to do. Yes, you might do that, he said, but there's no way to that place. It lies east of the sun and west of the moon, and thither you'll never find your way. So when she had rubbed the sleep out of her eyes and wept till she was tired, she set out on her way, and walked many, many days, till she came to a lofty crag. Under it sat an old hag, and played with a golden apple, which she tossed about. She, the lassie, asked if she knew the way to the prince, who lived with his stepmother in the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and who was to marry the princess with the nose 3 ells long. How did you come to know him? Asked the old hag. But maybe you are the girl who ought to have had him. Yes, she was. So, it's you, isn't it? Said the old hag. Well, all I know about him is that he lives in the castle that lies east of the moon and west of the sun, and thither you'll come, late or never, but still you may have the loan of my horse, and on him you can ride to my next neighbor. Maybe she'll be able to tell you. And when you get there, just give the horse a switch under the left ear and beg him to be off home and stay. This gold apple you may take with you. So she got upon the horse and rode a long, long time, till she came to another crag, under which sat another old hag with a gold carding comb. Her the girl asked if she knew the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and she answered like the first old hag, that she knew nothing about it except that it was east of the sun and west of the moon. And thither you'll come, late or never, but you shall have the loan of my horse to my next neighbor, and maybe she'll tell you all about it, and when you get there, just switch the horse under the left ear and beg him to be off home. And this old hag gave her the gold carding comb. It might be she'd find some use for it, the hag said. So the girl got up on the horse and rode a far, far way, and a weary time, and so at long last she came to another great crag, under which sat another old hag spinning with a gold spinning wheel. Her too she asked if she knew the way to the prince, and where the castle was that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. So it was the same thing over again. Maybe it's you who ought to have had the prince, said the old hag. Yes, it was. But she too didn't know the way a bit better than the other two. East of the sun and west of the moon it was, she knew, and that was all. And thither you'll come, late or never, but I'll lend you my horse, and then I think you'd best ride to the east wind and ask him. Maybe he knows these parts and can blow you thither. But when you get to him, you need only give the horse a switch under the left ear, and he'll trot home of himself. And so, too, she gave her the gold spinning wheel. Maybe you'll find a use for it, said the old hag. Then on she rode many, many days, a weary time, before she got to the east wind's house. But at last she did reach it, and she asked the east wind if she could tell her the way to the prince who dwelt east of the sun and west of the moon. Yes, the east wind had often heard tell of it, the prince in the castle, but he couldn't tell her the way, for he'd never blown so far. But if you will, said the east wind, I'll go with you to my brother the west wind. Maybe he knows, for he's much stronger, so if you will get on my back, I'll carry you thither. Yes, she got on his back, and I should think they went briskly along. So when they got there, they went into the west wind's house, and the east wind said the girl he had brought was the one who ought to have had the prince who lived in the castle east of the sun and west of the moon. And so she had set out to seek him, and how he had come with her, and would be glad to know if the west wind knew how to get to the castle. Nay, said the west wind, so far I've never blown, but if you will, I'll go with you to our brother the south wind, for he's much stronger than either of us, and he has flapped his wings far and wide. Maybe he'll tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you to him. Yes, she got on his back, and so they travelled to the south wind, and weren't so very long on the way, I should think. When they got there, the west wind asked him if he could tell her the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, for it was she who ought to have had the prince who lived there. You don't say so. That's she, is it? Said the south wind. Well, I've blustered about in many places in my time, but so far have I never blown. But if you will, I'll take you to my brother the north wind. He is the oldest and the strongest of the whole lot of us, and if he doesn't know where it is, you'll never find anyone in the world to tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you thither. Yes, she got on his back, and away he went from his house at a fine rate. And this time, too, she wasn't long on her way. So when they got to the north wind's house, he was so wild and cross, cold puffs came from him a long way off. Blast, both of you! What do you want? He roared out to them ever so far off, so that it struck them with an icy shiver. Well, said the south wind, you needn't be so foul-mouthed, for here I am, your brother, the south wind, and here is the girl who ought to have had the prince who dwells in the castle that lies east of the moon and west of the sun. And now she wants to ask you if you were ever there, and can tell her the way, for she would be so glad to find him again. Yes, said the north wind, I know well enough where it is. Once in my life I blew an aspen leaf thither, but I was so tired I couldn't blow a puff for ever so many days after. But if you really wish to go thither and aren't afraid to come along with me, I'll take you on my back and see if I can blow you there. Yes, she said, with all my heart. I must and would get there thither if it were possible in any way, and as for fear, however madly you go, I won't at all be afraid. Very well, then, said the north wind, but you must sleep here tonight, for we must have the whole day before us if we are to get there at all. Early the next morning the north wind woke her, and puffed himself up, and blew himself out, and made himself so stout and big 'twas gruesome to look at him, and so off they went, high up through the air, as if they would never stop till they got to the world's end. Down here below there was such a storm, it threw down long tracts of wood and many houses, and when it swept over the great sea, ships foundered by hundreds. So they tore on and on, no one can believe how far they went, and all the while they still went over the sea, and the north wind got more and more weary, and so out of breath he could scarce bring out a puff, and his wings drooped and drooped and drooped, till at last he sunk so low that the crests of the waves dashed over his heels. Are you afraid? Said the north wind. No, she said, I'm not. But they weren't very far from land, and the north wind still had enough strength left in him that he managed to throw her up onto the shore under the windows of the castle, which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. And then he was so weak and worn out, he had to stay there and rest many days before he could get home again. Next morning, the girl sat down under the castle window and began to play with the long gold apple, and the first person she saw was the long-nose, who was to have the prince. What do you want for your gold apple, you girl? Said the long-nose, and threw up the window. It's not for sale for gold or money, said the girl. If it's not for sale for gold or money, what is it for sale for? Said the princess. You may name your own price. Well, said the girl, if I may get to the prince who lives here and be with him tonight, you shall have it, said the girl whom the north wind had brought. Yes, she might. That could be done. So the princess got the gold apple, but when the girl came up to the prince's bedroom at night, he was fast asleep. She called him and shook him, and between whiles she wept sore. But all she could do, she couldn't wake him up. Next morning, as soon as day broke, came the princess with the long nose and drove her out again. So in the daytime she sat down under the castle windows and began to card with her carding comb, and the same thing happened. The princess asked what she wanted for it, and she said it wasn't for sale for gold or money, but if she might get leave to go up to the prince and be with him that night, the princess should have it. But when she went up, she found him fast asleep again, and all she called and all she shook and wept and prayed she couldn't get life into him. And as soon as the first grey peep of dawn came, then came the princess with her long nose and chased her out again. So, in the daytime, the girl sat down outside under the castle window and began to spin with her long spinning wheel, and that too the princess with the long nose wanted to have. So she threw up the window and asked what she wanted for it. The girl said, as she had said twice before, it wasn't for sale for gold or money, but if she might go up to the prince who was there and be with him alone that night, she might have it. Yes, she might do that and be welcome. But now you must know that there were some folk who had been carried off thither, and as they sat in their room, which was next to the prince, they heard how a woman had been in there and wept and prayed and called to him 2 nights running, and they told that to the prince. That evening, when the princess came with her sleepy drink, the prince made as if he drank, but threw it over his shoulder, for he could guess it was a sleepy drink. So when the girl came in, she found the prince wide awake, and then she told him the whole story about how he had come thither. "Ah," said the prince, "you've just come in the very nick of time, for tomorrow is to be our wedding day, and you are the only woman in the world who can set me free. I'll say I want to see what my wife is fit for, and beg her to wash the shirt which has the 3 spots of tallow on it. She'll say yes, for she doesn't know 'tis you who put them there, but that's work only for you and not for her, and so I'll say that I won't have any other for my bride than the woman who can wash them out, and ask you to do it." So there was great joy and love between them all that night, but the next day when the wedding was to be, the prince said, "Well, first of all, I'd like to see what my bride is fit for." "Yes," said the stepmother with all her heart. "Well," said the prince, "I've got a fine shirt which I'd like for my wedding shirt, but somehow or other it has got 3 spots of tallow on it, which I must have washed out. And I have sworn never to take any other bride than the woman who's able to do that. If she can't, she's not worth having." Well, that was no great thing, they said, so they agreed, and she with the long nose began to wash away as hard as she could, but the more she rubbed and scrubbed, the bigger the spots grew. "Ah," said the old hag, her mother, "you can't wash, let me try." But she hadn't long taken the shirt in hand before it got far worse than ever, and with all her rubbing and wringing and scrubbing, the spots grew bigger and blacker, and the darker and uglier was the shirt. Then all the other trolls began to wash, but the longer it lasted, the blacker and uglier the shirt grew, till at last it was as black all over as if it had been up a chimney. "Ah," said the prince, "you're none of you with a straw you can't wash. Why, outside there sits a beggar girl. I'll be bound she knows how to wash better than a whole lot of you. Come in, girl." Well, in she came. "Can you wash this shirt clean?" said he. "I don't know," she said, "but I think I can." And almost before she had taken it and dipped it in the water, it was as white as driven snow, and whiter still. "Yes," said the prince, "you are the girl for me." At that the old hag flew into such a rage she burst on the spot, and the troll princess with the long nose after her, and the whole pack of trolls after her. At least I've never heard a word about them since. As for the prince and princess, they set free all the poor folk who had been carried off and shut up there, and they took with them all the silver and gold, and flitted away as far as they could from the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. The end. Good night.